A grim discovery stopped work at a construction site in Weld County today, uncovered what appeared to be human bones.
The excavator bucket hit the ground and snapped a 13,000-year-old silence. Out spilled red bones and weapons sharp enough to shave with. This wasn't just a grave, it was a time capsule from the Clovis people, the phantom hunters of the Americas. We knew they eliminated mammoths, but we had no idea who they were, until now. New genetic sequencing has unlocked a secret hiding in the blood of 80% of all Native Americans alive today. Basically, this one toddler is the grandfather of a hemisphere, but the journey his ancestors took to get here is terrifyingly fast. The 13,000-year-old crime scene. It was a cold morning in May, 1968. Near the small town of Wilsall, Montana, two construction workers were doing a job that was supposed to be boring. They were digging for fill dirt, tearing into the side of a sandstone outcrop. The machine groaned, the bucket scraped the rock, and then everything changed. As the dirt fell away, it wasn't brown, it was red. Brilliant blood-red dust spilled out onto the ground, mixing with the Montana snow. And inside that red dust were bones. This wasn't a crime scene from the 1960s, it was a time capsule from the end of the Ice Age. The workers had stumbled upon the grave of a male toddler, aged about 1 or 2 years old. But the boy wasn't alone. He was buried with a treasure hoard that would make a modern archaeologist weep. Surrounding the small ribs and skull were over 100 stone tools. And we aren't talking about crude rocks here. These were Clovis points, some of the most sophisticated stone weapons ever made by human hands. They were fluted, sharp as surgical steel, and made from exotic materials that had been carried for hundreds of miles. But here is the catch. For decades, these tools fueled one of the wildest, most controversial theories in the history of science, the Solutrean hypothesis. You see, when scientists looked at these beautiful stone blades, they noticed something weird. They didn't look like the stone tools found in Siberia or Alaska from the same time. In fact, they didn't look Asian at all. To some experts, they looked identical to tools made by the Solutrean people. There was just one problem. The Solutrean people lived in France and Spain, and they lived there thousands of years before the Anzac child was born. This coincidence birthed a theory that split the scientific community in half. The theory claimed that the first Americans didn't walk across the Bering Land Bridge from Asia. Instead, they argued that ancient Europeans, during the height of the Ice Age, got into sealskin boats and paddled along the edge of the frozen Atlantic Ocean. Imagine the movie-style drama of this. A band of rugged cavemen from France, navigating icebergs like the Titanic, hunting seals, and eventually landing on the east coast of America. They brought their stone-making style with them, which eventually became the Clovis points found in the Anzac grave. It sounds crazy, but for a long time it was a legitimate argument. High-profile researchers at the Smithsonian pushed this idea. They pointed to the flint knapping techniques. They said, "Look at the way the stone is chipped. You can't fake that." The Anzac child was stuck right in the middle of this battle. If he was related to Europeans, history would have to be rewritten. It would mean the New World was actually discovered by Europeans 10,000 years before Columbus. But it's not that simple, though. The red ochre covering the boy told a different story. Red ochre burials are ancient. We find them in Europe, yes, but we also find them in Siberia, in Africa, and in Australia. It's a human thing, not just a European thing. It represents the blood of birth and the blood of death. It's a wish for life to continue. For 40 years, the Anzac child sat in a box. The technology to settle the debate just didn't exist. He was a silent witness to people arguing over his heritage. Was he a lost European explorer, or was he the descendant of Asian mammoth hunters? Then came the year 2014, and later the refined data of 2025. Genetic science finally caught up to the mystery. Scientists drilled into the ancient bone and extracted the DNA. The Solutrean hypothesis didn't just take a hit, it was completely destroyed. The genome of the Anzac child showed zero connection to ancient Europeans. None. There was no French DNA in Montana. Instead, his genes screamed Northeast Asia. He was fully, undeniably descended from the peoples of Siberia. The resemblance of the tools? It was just a coincidence, a case of convergent evolution where two different groups of people invent the same solution to a problem because it works. But while the DNA eliminated the Atlantic theory, it opened the door to something even stranger. The data showed that while his ancestors came from Asia, they weren't just Asians anymore. They had been isolated for so long that they had become something new. And get this, the tools buried with him, the elk antler rods, the giant bifaces, they weren't just for hunting. Some of them were broken on purpose. This is a ritual called eliminating the object. The idea is that by breaking the spear, you release its spirit so it can travel with the boy to the afterlife. This implies that 13,000 years ago, these people had a complex concept of the soul. They weren't just surviving, they were thinking about eternity. But the world the Anzac child lived in was about to end. And some theories suggest it wasn't a slow decline. Some say it was a bang, a cosmic bang. As the tribe mourned this child, the sky above them might have been hiding a fiery secret that was about to wipe the slate clean. The lost world of the megafauna. Let's be real. The world of 12,900 years ago was like an alien planet. It wasn't just cold, it was filled with monsters. When the Anzac child was alive, North America was a Serengeti of ice. There were short-faced bears that stood 12 feet tall on their hind legs, predators so fast they could run down a horse. There were American lions, massive ground sloths the size of cars, and of course the woolly mammoths. The Clovis people, the Anzac child's family, were the masters of this domain. They hunted these beasts. We have found their stone points stuck in the bones of mammoths. They were the apex predators. But then, almost overnight, it all stopped. The Clovis culture vanished. The mammoths died out. The horses and camels of America disappeared, and the temperature plummeted back into a deep freeze. This period is called the Younger Dryas. For a long time, scientists thought this was just a natural climate wobble. But recently, a wild theory has gained serious traction, and the Anzac child's timeline sits right in the splash zone. It's called the Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis. The idea is that a fragmented comet, miles wide, slammed into the Earth or exploded in the atmosphere over the North American ice sheet. This explosion would have been stronger than all the nuclear weapons on Earth combined. It would have instantly melted millions of tons of ice, causing massive floods. It would have set the forests on fire. The smoke would have blocked out the sun, causing a nuclear winter that eliminated the plants, which eliminated the herbivores, which eliminated the predators. Is it true? Well, scientists have found a black mat, a layer of soil from exactly this time period that contains microscopic diamonds and iridium, stuff that usually only comes from space. The Anzac child was buried right at the end of the Clovis reign. Was his family running from this catastrophe? Was the red ochre ritual a plea to angry gods who were raining fire from the sky? The new 2025 data on the Anzac child doesn't prove the comet theory directly, but it shows a massive population bottleneck. That means the population of humans in North America crashed. Hard. Basically, the genetic diversity dropped. This suggests that something terrible happened. Whether it was a comet, a plague, or just sudden climate change, the Anzac child lived through the apocalypse. And then there are the even wilder theories. The giants. If you go down the YouTube rabbit hole, you will find thousands of people obsessed with the idea that the mounds of North America were built by a lost race of giants, 7 or 8 feet tall. They claim the Smithsonian hid the bones. They claim the Bible talks about them. The Nephilim. They look at the massive Clovis spear points, some of them seemingly too big for a normal arrow, and say, "See, only a giant could throw that." So does the Anzac genome have anything to say about giants? Yeah, about that. The DNA tells us exactly what these people looked like. And sorry to disappoint the conspiracy theorists, but they weren't giants. The genes predict that the Anzac child would have had brown eyes, dark hair, and shovel-shaped incisors, a classic trait of Asian and Native American teeth. His potential height? Totally average for a human. The giant spear points found with him were likely ceremonial. They were oversized to show off skill or to offer a bigger gift to the spirits, not because the people were 10 feet tall. But there is another ghost in the machine, a mystery that is actually grounded in science. For a long time, we thought Clovis people were the first. Clovis first was the golden rule. But recently, we have found sites that shatter this. The White Sands footprints in New Mexico, which might be 23,000 years old. The Cheruti Mastodon site in California, which some claim is 130,000 years old. If those dates are real, it means there were people here before the Anzac child. Long before. So who were they? Did the Anzac child's people meet them? Did they fight them? Or did these earlier people die out before the Clovis arrived? The Anzac genome is remarkably clean. It doesn't show a mixture with some unknown, ancient, non-human species or some vastly different group of humans. This suggests that if there were earlier people, population Y, they were either already dead or they kept their distance. But the DNA did reveal a standstill, a pause in the movie of migration. And this pause happened in a place that doesn't exist anymore. To understand where the Anzac child came from, we have to travel to a lost continent that is now at the bottom of the ocean. Mutation in the Arctic. Most people think of the Bering Land Bridge as a narrow strip of ice that people ran across to get to Alaska, like a skinny bridge over a river. That is completely wrong. Beringia was a massive landmass. It was a subcontinent twice the size of Texas, sitting between Siberia and Alaska. It wasn't covered in ice, it was a grassy steppe teeming with mammoths and bison. The new genetic modeling from the Anzac data supports a theory called the Beringian Standstill. Here is the deal. The ancestors of the Anzac child left Asia around 25,000 years ago, but they didn't arrive in America until around 15,000 years ago. So where were they for those 10,000 years? They were stuck in Beringia. The ice walls blocked them from moving east into Canada. The ocean blocked them from going south, and the ice behind them blocked the retreat to Siberia. They were trapped in a genetic incubator. For thousands of years, this small group of people, perhaps only a few thousand individuals, lived, loved, and died on this lost continent. Because they were isolated, their DNA started to change. Unique mutations developed that didn't exist in Asia. This is the birth of the first Americans. They stopped being Siberians and became something new. The Anzac child carries this specific, unique genetic signature. He is the direct product of this isolation. But then, the world melted. The ice sheets broke apart, opening a corridor into the heart of North America, and the people flooded in. This brings us to the most staggering statistic of the entire study. When scientists compared the Anzac boy's DNA to modern people, the match was undeniable. He is more closely related to Native Americans than to any other human beings on Earth. Specifically, he belongs to the Southern Branch, the group that split off and headed south. The data indicates that roughly 80% of all indigenous populations in North and South America are descendants of this boy's direct family line. Think about that. 80%. The Cree, the Navajo, the Aztec, the Inca, the Yanomami. Despite their different languages, different cultures, and different empires, they all share a root in this one group of mammoth hunters who buried a baby in Montana. But what about the other 20%? They are mostly from the Northern Branch, groups like the Athabascans, including the Apache and Navajo ancestors who moved south later. But even they are distant cousins of the Anzac child. This DNA evidence destroys the idea that the Americas were a melting pot of ancient migrations from Europe, Africa, and Polynesia all mixing together. No, it was a single unified family event. However, there is a twist. A ghost. In the deep Amazon, specifically among the Surui people of Brazil, scientists found a tiny trace of DNA that doesn't fit. It's called population Y. This DNA looks Australasian, like the indigenous people of Australia and New Guinea. How on earth did DNA from Australia get into the Amazon rainforest 14,000 years ago? Did Aboriginal Australians build boats and cross the Pacific? That is the Thor Heyerdahl style theory. It's romantic, it's wild, but the Anzac child helps clarify this too. His genome doesn't have this population Y signal. This implies that the population Y group might have been a separate pulse of migration, maybe an earlier one that trickled in and got absorbed. Or it was a ghost lineage present in Asia that hitchhiked along with the Beringians but only survived in a few pockets in the Amazon. It remains one of the few true mysteries left. But for the Anzac child, the message is clear. He is the reference genome. He is the standard by which all other ancient American DNA is measured. And the most impressive part of his biology? It's not just who he was related to, it's how fast his people moved. Geneticists call it a star-like expansion. On a graph, it looks like an explosion. One minute they are in Alaska. The next minute, genetically speaking, they are in Chile. This wasn't a migration, it was a blitzkrieg. They didn't just walk, they ran to the ends of the earth. How to conquer a continent. Everyone is obsessed with the idea that ancient people were slow. We have been conditioned by bad textbooks and old movies to picture them stumbling through the snow, confused, wrapped in ragged furs, maybe moving 5 miles a generation. We imagine them paralyzed by the cold, huddled in caves, terrified of the horizon. But the data from the Anzac child stands up and screams, "Wrong!" When you look at the timeline, the slow migration narrative falls apart. It shatters. The genetic split between the northern branch of Native Americans and the southern branch happened roughly 16,000 to 15,000 years ago. That is the starting gun. That is when the family divided. Yet we have hard, undeniable archaeological evidence of humans living at Monteverde in southern Chile 14,500 years ago. Do the math. Seriously, sit down and look at the geography. That is a distance of 10,000 miles from the ice bridge in the north to the tip of South America. If they walked, if they took the overland route, they would have had to cross the frozen Rockies, navigate the blistering deserts of Mexico, hack through the fever jungles of the Darien Gap in Panama, climb the oxygen-starved heights of the Andes Mountains, and survive the Atacama Desert, the driest place on Earth. To get to Chile that fast, they would have had to move at a speed that seems impossible for families carrying babies, elders, and supplies. They would have needed to be sprinting. This mathematical impossibility has caused the wildest theories to spin out of control. For decades, fringe researchers looked at this speed and said, humans couldn't do it. They started suggesting the impossible. Some claimed that the Americas were already populated by a lost race. Giants, perhaps, or a distinct species of hominid that we haven't identified yet, something archaic and strong that could smash through the jungle effortlessly. Others looked at the sheer impossibility of the terrain and suggested that the geography itself was different, that the Earth was flatter, or that there were tunnel systems. But the answer is likely something far more dynamic, yet equally spectacular. This impossibility led to the coastal migration theory, often called the kelp highway. The theory posits that the Anzac child's cousins didn't walk through the middle of the continent like suckers. They were distinct. They were mariners. They took boats. Imagine this, a sophisticated maritime culture that has been entirely lost to history. We aren't talking about logs lashed together. We are talking about skin boats, engineered for cold water, capable of navigating the violent swells of the North Pacific. They hugged the coast. They ate kelp, seals, and fish. They could move hundreds of miles in a single season, bypassing the glaciers, bypassing the dense forests, skipping over the impassable terrain like a stone thrown across a pond. They were skipping down the coast. But here is where the theories get darker and more mysterious. If they were moving along the coast 14,000 years ago, where are their villages? Where are their boats? They are gone, because the ocean swallowed them. At the end of the Ice Age, sea levels rose by hundreds of feet. The kelp highway, the entire coastline where these first explorers lived, is now underwater. It's miles offshore. This has birthed the theory of the sunken civilization. Not Atlantis, not magic, but a very real, very extensive human history that is currently rotting on the continental shelf. We are literally missing the first chapter of American history because it is drowned. Some archaeologists believe that if we could drain the Pacific coast, we wouldn't just find arrowheads. We might find evidence of a culture far more advanced than we give them credit for. We might find that they didn't just arrive. We might find that they built a maritime empire that connected Alaska to Chile in a few generations. The Anzac people, the Clovis, were likely the ones who decided to turn left. They were the ones who looked at the kelp highway, saw the interior of the continent opening up as the ice melted and said, "Let's go inland." They got off the coastal highway and headed into the heart of Montana to hunt the big game. They chose the mammoths over the seals. But their cousins, the ones who didn't turn left, they kept going. This speed explains why the Anzac DNA is found everywhere. They got there first and they exploded in population. They filled the empty landscape before anyone else could show up. It is what scientists call a population bloom. It's biological domination. But this rapid expansion also created a tragedy. As they moved, they adapted, but they also forgot. Within a few thousand years, the unified culture shattered. The distance was too great. The languages drifted apart. The people in the Amazon forgot the words for snow and mammoth because they didn't need them anymore. The people in the Andes adapted to high altitudes, genetically developing larger lungs to breathe thin air. The Anzac child represents the last moment of unity, the last moment when Native American was a single tribe, speaking one language, telling one story around the fire. However, the DNA revealed something else, something that fueled a theory so wild it sounds like science fiction. Deep in the genetic code of some Amazonian tribes, scientists found a ghost signal. It's called population Y. This DNA doesn't look like the Anzac child. It doesn't look like the Siberians. It looks like Australian Aborigines. How? How on earth does DNA from Australia end up in the Amazon rainforest 14,000 years ago? This has birthed the Trans-Pacific theory. Did a boatload of people drift from Oceania across the vast, empty Pacific Ocean 10,000 years before recorded history? Did they crash land in South America and mix with the Anzac lineage? Or is there an even stranger explanation? Some theorists suggest that there was another group of people in Asia, a ghost population, that migrated north, mixed with the ancestors of the Anzac child, and then vanished from the face of the earth, leaving their ghost signal only in the blood of the Amazonians. The Anzac boy silenced the Solutrean hypothesis, the idea that Native Americans came from Europe across the Atlantic ice. That theory was popular for a while. It suggested that white Europeans were the true first Americans. The Anzac DNA crushed that idea. It proved the lineage was Asian, Beringian, and distinct. But population Y, that mystery remains. It suggests that the Americas were a melting pot way before Columbus, way before the Vikings. It suggests a prehistory so complex that we are only seeing the shadows of it. Now let's talk about the ending of this story, the reburial. The scientific study of the Anzac child was a triumph, arguably the greatest DNA triumph of the century. But it was also a violation. You have to understand the worldview clash here. For Western science, bones are data. They are calcium archives waiting to be read. But for many Native Americans, time is not linear. The ancestors are not gone, they are present. Digging up an ancestor and grinding his bones into dust for a test tube is not just rude, it is a spiritual war crime. It disturbs the spirit. It risks bringing sickness and sorrow to the living. There were whispers of a curse. Some elders warned that tampering with the dead from the time of ice would unleash energies that the modern world had forgotten how to handle. They warned that the boy was buried with red ochre for a reason, to seal him, to protect him, or perhaps to protect us from him. The scientists, led by S.K. Willerslev, realized they were standing on a precipice. They couldn't just treat this boy like a lab rat. They had to treat him like a human child. They engaged with the tribes. They sat in circle meetings. They shared the information. And surprisingly, the tribes saw the data as a victory. It proved what their creation stories had always said. The elders had always insisted, we didn't come from Europe. We didn't come from outer space. We didn't migrate here recently. We have been here since the beginning. The DNA confirmed it. The Anzac child proved they were the first people. In a rare moment of unity, the scientists and the tribes agreed to put him back. On June 28, 2014, the bones of the Anzac child were placed in a box. There were prayers in ancient languages that had not been spoken over those bones in 12,000 years. There was crying. And then he was buried again, deep in the Montana earth, under the protection of the rocks. Some scientists were furious. They were absolutely livid. They screamed, "You are burying data. You are destroying the Library of Alexandria. What if we invent a new test in 50 years? What if we could clone him? What if we missed something about his immune system?" They argued that knowledge belongs to everyone, that science supersedes superstition. But the decision stood. The ethical cost was too high. The Anzac child had done his job. He had spoken across the millenniums. He told us that the Solutrean Europeans were a myth. He told us that the giants were just stories. He told us that a single family survived the ice, the comets, and the monsters to found the nations of the Americas. He proved that we are all more connected than we think. And get this. Even though his bones are back in the ground, rotting into the soil, his information is immortal. The sequence of his DNA is stored in computers around the world. It is on servers in Copenhagen, in London, in New York. You can download his genome right now if you know where to look. He has become a digital ghost. He will never really be lost again. So the next time you look at a map of the Americas, don't just see borders. Don't just see states and countries. See the playground of a single brave family who ran into the dark. See the boats bobbing on the waves of a rising ocean, carrying people who had no maps, no GPS, and no guarantee of survival. See the population-wide ghosts drifting through the jungle. They built a new world on the edge of a knife. But it makes you wonder, the Anzac child was found by accident. A construction worker just happened to hit the spot with a backhoe. If we found the key to the entire history of the continent from just one accidental discovery, what else is down there? What other impossible lineages are buried under the parking lots and cornfields? What other ghost populations are waiting in the dark? We think we know our history. We think we know who we are. But the soil is deep, and it is filled with secrets that are waiting to shatter our reality all over again. Do you believe there was a ghost population here even before the Clovis people, hiding in the shadows? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you want more mind-bending history, make sure to like and subscribe.